Okay, so today we're going to talk about modifications to the Acura CL Type S. I was able to pick up and find some headers for the CL, and what we're actually going to do today is work on getting this header to look like this header. Now these are pretty rare. As I said, they're Comptech USA. These are discontinued headers. They're not very easily found, I'll put it that way, but if someone searched hard and long enough, they might actually find these. The hard thing would be is to find them in good condition. As you can tell here, this one has seen some significant weathering. You got the manifold here that is rusted and pitted pretty severely to the point where that's not very easily saved. I tried my hardest on this one because this is one that you can actually see when you're popping the hood. This is going to be the front side of the motor, and this is going to be the back side of the motor. On the Acura CL, you can tell here that there's a little S piping going on here. This is so that you clear the rear motor mount, which is unique to the CL Type S 6-speed. The automatics, they don't have that straight down because their motor mount's a little bit smaller. So you could use these on an automatic, but you can't do the inverse, which is put an automatic set of headers on the 6-speed. But anyways, these are stainless steel, probably 303, 309 stainless steel, so they polish up pretty well once you get them cleaned up. The manifold bracket here is likely going to be steel, but it might be stainless steel as well. Kind of looks like stainless steel when you grind it down enough. But the manifolds themselves are in good shape. The flanges, to the manifold are in good shape. The problem is that how much work and labor that's actually going to go into refreshing the flanges is probably not beneficial. So we're really just going to focus on, can we get the exhaust piping for the manifold to look presentable so that if you were to pop the hood on the CL, it doesn't seem out of place or seem a little garbagey for that presentation. And since everything else under the hood is pretty much tidied up, it would be kind of a sore eye underneath all of that. The tools that you're going to need to do something of this nature, there's multiple different methods. The easiest DIY method, since this is stainless steel and you're working with stainless steel, is really just to get to the layer of dirt or rust, surface rust, or whatever it may be off, and see what you're working with. In this case, this one cleaned up fairly well to the point where it's almost ready to go on, I would say. I'm going to do some work to clean up the brush marks on here because I was using a wire wheel. So if you're working on stainless steel, you don't want to use a steel brush. You want to use a set of brass brushes. That way you sacrifice the brass and not the metal on the manifold. That's kind of the theory there. Gloves are optional. I would recommend them. It's kind of messy. I like this. This is a scouring pad designed to remove paint. So you always want to work with the least abrasive, least damaging material and work your way to something maybe more damaging on the hard spots. So something of this nature, which is a carbide wheel, you could use on the flanges to clean up, but you wouldn't want to use this on the piping because it will mar it and it will look pretty unpresentable at that point. So something like wet sandpaper, which I have here, and I have some just regular wood sandpaper, but it's pretty harsh on the material. So this is a 120. I would probably use this on the surface rust of the flanges, and then on the actual piping itself, I would use this initially to see what I'm working with. Maybe it's in great condition like this one was, and it was just a matter of cleaning up the dirt off of it. And if that didn't work, then I'd likely move to an 800 wet using some degreaser. So this is simple green loaded in here with no dilution. And then I have 1500 grit sandpaper here, which is pretty much the finishing touches on there. And we'll use some chrome polish to see if we can get it to shine a little bit further, but otherwise this is, you know, where you could stop if you so wanted to and not put such a shine on it. You could leave it kind of a matte finish, which could be desirable as well, depending on, you know, the individual. This wire, brass wire brush here, I've been using to get into the harder places where, you know, you might not get a lot of you know, finger in there, or you might have a hard time, you know, getting into the tight nooks and crannies of this. Sometimes this gets in there a little bit better. But varying sizes of brass brushes is a good place to, or a good way to get in there as well. I do have a Dremel tool here. I've been using this as a trial to see if I can clean up some of the flange. The other good thing about using a wet sandpaper, you can clean up your gasket surfaces so that when you go put this on, it should seal pretty well. So that is that. So let's go through the process. I also take the opportunity to inspect it and see if there's any cracks. You know, thankfully, I don't think this does. I haven't inspected this one yet, but it looks pretty good from what I can tell. I'm not seeing any signs of cracking. But the other good thing about cleaning these up is that, you know, cracks present a lot easier once you've cleaned up the manifold. Let's start with a good degreaser. And now we're just going to take our paint removing scouring pad. This is pretty much the most abrasive one that I could find at the store. And you're just going to work your way. Maybe you can see what I'm talking about. If I shine the light just like this, you can see that there's a crack all the way around going right where the metal pipe meets the weld line there. Let's see if I can tilt this a little bit better. So like right under where those weld flux, or so right where the weld is, you can see like right at the bottom of the weld where the pipe is, there's a crack that goes all the way around. You can also see it on the inside right there a little bit better. So we definitely have to get this fixed. And I was looking at the other one. The other one looks pretty good. The only thing is, it looks like there might be a crack right there. You can kind of see the reflection. Yeah, right there. So it's right where the manifold meets the pipe again. So that's pretty typical. I mean, heating and cooling cycles, I would expect it to fail right at the welds. Just picked up the Comptech headers from my welder. He was able to correct all the cracks at the flanges here and here on both of these. So both hairline cracks have been mended. Now we just have to clean up the header here on the back side to make it look like the front side, and we will install it. So here we have the Comptech headers for the Acura CL Type S specific model. As you can see here, they're all cleaned up. I was able to restore the stainless steel. Now I spent considerable more time on this one than this one. That being because this one right here is the one that you see when you open the hood, and this one you will never see because it's tucked behind the back side of the engine. Now, for those who aren't aware, Comptech was one of the first companies, and maybe only the few companies, that actually have a CARB legal setup. So for those in California looking for a upgrade, this would be a good option. Good luck trying to find a pair because they are very sought after, especially if you have the 6-speed variant of the CL. You can see here the distinct S bend in this collector or header. That is to clear the motor mount, which is unique to the 6-speed. Now we're going to take these and we're going to install them and give a review. So here we have the OEM setup. As you can see here, there is a heat shield that goes over the OEM, which is 3 bolts, and in my case they're all rusted, so they stand out. In a previous work, I went ahead and painted this. This is traditionally a aluminum with a shine to it from the factory. Since mine was rusted pretty severely, I went ahead and opted for a black heat-resistant paint. But we will have to remove this as well as the backside and the downpipe, or what they call the J pipe. So I was able to get the front side in pretty easily. To clear the ignition coils and the radiator fans, it's best to remove this piece and the 3 ignition coil packs here. Now when it comes to the backside, it's a little bit more difficult. You really have to take the J pipe down on the bottom side and then work a little bit from the top, which is really hard to see here. Yeah, I apologize, you can't really see. You have to work from the top and the bottom. Now if we were to look underneath right now, we see that we have the new Comptech, or used Comptech J pipe down on the bottom, and the difficulty is you have to be able to get to the top side of the header, and to do that you have to reach up and approach from the bottom, and you're really doing this blind. But it is coming together. We're almost done, just in the small closing pieces of putting it on. Now what I usually do is I leave everything loose and I slowly tighten it up to make sure that the fitment and seal between the gaskets is correct. So I was able to get the front side in pretty easily. To clear the ignition coils and the radiator fans, it's best to remove this piece and the three ignition coil packs here. Now when it comes to the back side, it's a little bit more difficult. You really have to uh, take the J-pipe down on the bottom side and then work a little bit from the top, which is really hard to see here. Yeah, I apologize, you can't really see. You have to work from the top and the bottom. Now, if we were to look underneath right now, we see that we have the new Comptech or used Comptech J-pipe down on the bottom. And the difficulty is you have to be able to get to the top side of the header, and to do that you have to reach up and approach from the bottom, and you're really doing this blind. But it is coming together. We're almost done, just in the small closing pieces of putting it on. Now what I usually do is I leave everything loose and I slowly tighten it up to make sure that the fitment and seal between the gaskets is correct. So here we are after the install of the Comptech headers and downpipe. See, it looks pretty good in the engine bay. If you get it from this stance, definitely is the first thing that you see when you open the hood. On the back side, there's too much there, you can't really see it. So if you notice that I didn't clean the back as well as the front, that's kind of the reason behind that. Felt like this was more the presentation that you would see when you open up the hood, and nobody will really ever see the rear. So we have the Comptech intake now, and then we have the Comptech headers. So the question is, will I put any more Comptech parts on this car? That's probably not likely to happen. So they do make a titanium upper strut mount, and as I understand, they have a lower one. Those are very hard to come by. I have seen some for sale. They are kind of astronomical in price, I think, for what they actually offer. If you're maybe taking it to a track, maybe you'll see some performance, but for the most part, the OEM one will be just fine in this application. Now, you may ask yourself, why am I doing this? This is another piece of the puzzle that takes away from the originality. I kind of feel like this is a necessary upgrade for that driving experience, that raw kind of a human to machine experience, because this does improve the throttle response as well as it does improve the note of the exhaust. So I think that's kind of the reason behind doing this. Now mind you, as I've said before, all the original parts for this vehicle will remain in my possession, just because if for whatever reason it comes to the point where I want to sell this and I want to bring it back to original condition, I have that capacity to do so. But for everyday driving, which I don't drive this every day, but for those days that I do drive, I think I want something a little bit higher on the performance scale, a little bit more of an experience, a little bit more of a human to machine experience, which is also kind of the reason why you'll notice I did the suspension upgrades. So these are all drivability experience upgrades. I'm not going to do cosmetic upgrades. I'm not going to do any kind of like 90s upgrades or early 2000 upgrades to make this car more of a fast and furious kind of a car, if you will. That's not going to happen here. So what I thought would be interesting is to see if there is a measurable difference between the factory setup and the Comptech header installation with the new J-pipe. From a sound perspective, we're running OEM mufflers, but when you install header, sometimes you actually increase the noise. Now, I don't expect a huge increase in noise, but let's see what the baseline is and compare it to the post-installation noise and see if we pick up any decibel readings. So it appears at a cold start we're about 76 decibels. As the car begins to warm up a little bit, the decibel reading will decrease as it settles into its normal RPM range. So this is approximately 1250 RPM decibel rating. What I'm going to do now is bring it up to about 2000 and then 2500 to see what those readings are. So that was at initial 2000 RPM and then 2500 RPM. Now we'll install the Comptech headers and see if we pick up any decibel baseline over the baseline reading. So now we're going to test the Comptech exhaust setup after being installed to see if the decibel rating has changed any. As you can see here, we have the decibel reader set up in approximately the same location as our initial reading. So let's see what happens when we give it a cold start. So we're at approximately 72 decibels at idle. Dropping down into an idle range of about 68 to 69 decibels. Okay, let's go ahead and see what happens when we rev. So that was at about 3000 RPM, and it looks like we hit just north of about 80 decibels. So what's interesting here is that the decibel range doesn't really change, but what does change is the note of the exhaust. If you see it become more raspy, or you hear deeper tone, which is interesting. So it's maybe not as much of a volume change as much as a difference in tone, which is interesting. So once again, this is a stock OEM muffler and center pipe, just different headers that are on there. So you actually see and hear the difference within that. At higher RPM ranges, I would say that while I was driving, you can notice a difference. You definitely hear it more, it's more pronounced. But within a sterile garage setting, just kind of turning it on and revving it, you don't really pick up that quality difference. So just something to note there. Otherwise, I think it's a pretty good upgrade, and we'll do a full review of this at a future point.